Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Before we begin, I have a small request. If you're liking the Hindu analysis and if you're benefiting from all our initiatives, do let us know by pressing the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by taking up an article from page number 1 of the Delhi edition. This article deals with proposed amendments to the Environment Protection Act. So, this gives us an opportunity to talk about the Environment Protection Act in detail, which happens to be an important topic for both prelims and mains, as it is a landmark legislation for tackling environmental pollution and for protecting our environment. See, if you look at the constitutional provisions related to environment protection, India's original constitution did not contain any such specific provisions. But however, through the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, which is also referred to as the mini constitution, a new provision was added to fundamental duties under Article 51A, which placed a duty on the citizens of the country to play a role in the protection of the environment, forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife. Along with adding this fundamental duty, the same amendment introduced a new directive principles of state policy under Article 48A and directed the state to protect the environment and natural resources. Through the same amendment, these subjects, that is environment, forests, wildlife, etc., they were moved to the concurrent list, thus making environment protection the joint responsibility of the center and the states. These landmark changes in the Indian Constitution were directly motivated by the Stockholm Conference of 1972, or the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which was the first major global conference on environmental issues. Under the Stockholm Conference, India took up several commitments and started implementing them one by introducing several laws and also by amending the constitution. First, the Wildlife Protection Act was enacted in 1972. This was followed by the Water Act of 1974 and the Air Act of 1981 to deal with water pollution and air pollution. Then finally, following the Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984, the government woke up to the threat posed by hazardous industries, and hence it was decided to implement the principle of polluter pays, so that those responsible for polluting the environment and for causing damage, they would be held liable for compensating for the damage. And accordingly, the landmark Environment Protection Act was enacted by the Parliament in 1986, and these laws in combination form the primary environmental laws of India. Then post 2000, the Biological Diversity Act was enacted in 2002 to fulfill India's commitments to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And in 2009, the National Green Tribunal was set up through the NGT Act, thus providing for a dedicated judicial mechanism to deal with environmental cases. So these are the primary environmental laws of India, and amongst them, the Environment Protection Act is a very crucial piece of legislation. Because this act was brought out by the Parliament to implement the decisions that were taken at the UN Conference on Human Environment that was held at Stockholm in 1972. In fact, the Parliament relied upon its powers under Article 253, which allows the Parliament to enact laws in order to fulfill India's international obligations. So accordingly, this act was brought out, which provided for the creation of a government authority to regulate the industry so that it can issue orders, including the orders to close down industries if they were seen to be polluting the environment. Consequently, institutions such as the Central Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Boards, and as well as the Ministry of Environment and Forest gained tremendous powers to enforce these laws. And the Environment Protection Act aims to promote coordination amongst all these agencies and government institutions in order to effectively deal with environmental threats in India. This act allows the government to bring out further laws for the protection of the environment and also provides for strict punishments along with hefty penalties for those who break the law. Under the Environment Protection Act, offences and violations are treated as criminal offences, and it not only provides for a jail term of up to 5 years, but it also includes a fine of up to 1 lakh rupees or both. The jail term can even be extended up to 7 years in serious cases of violations. Overall, it empowers the government to focus on sustainable development and to uphold right to life, which is a guaranteed fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. This act empowers the central government to take any measure that is necessary in order to provide for strict protection of our environment and biodiversity. Under this law, the center can coordinate and execute nationwide conservation protection programs and can even mandate strict environmental quality standards, especially to deal with emissions, release of effluents and pollutants, and thereby tackle the threat of air pollution and water pollution posed by industries. Under the law, restrictions can be placed on the location of industries as well, so that hazardous industries are not allowed to come up near ecologically sensitive areas. Under the law, the government and its institutions have the power of entry for examination of industries and to test the equipment which is being used, and also assess samples of air, water, and soil near industries to examine the extent of pollution that they are causing. It explicitly prohibits the discharge of effluents and pollutants into the environment, and for this purpose, it puts in place strict regulatory standards that are enforced by the pollution control boards. It even has specific provisions for handling hazardous substances such as toxic chemicals, heavy metals, etc., and mandates the industry to strictly comply with these standards. And the most important part of the legislation is that the Act not only empowers government officials to file complaints against polluting industries, but even citizens could bring the violations to notice and file a complaint against polluting industries. So the Act essentially allows for community participation or people's participation, thereby providing the citizens an opportunity to fulfill their fundamental duty. So to this important piece of legislation, the Government of India has proposed a few amendments, and it is primarily seeking to decriminalize the provisions that we discussed. As mentioned, under the current law, violations and offences have been criminalized. The law provides for jail term of up to 5 years and a fine of up to 1 lakh rupees or both. In case of serious offences, additional penalties can also be levied up to 5,000 rupees per day as long as the violation continues, and also provides for extended jail term of 7 years. But recently, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has proposed amendments to these provisions, and it is seeking to decriminalize all offences and violations. The rationale of the government behind this move is that the fear of jail term, even for simple violations and offences, is affecting enforcement of the law on the ground. And now that the government is looking to strictly enforce a ban on single-use plastic, which we discussed yesterday, the government wants a more simplified law which can provide for effective and strict enforcement. So the proposed amendment decriminalizes the violations and removes the jail term. But however, it increases the penalties by multiple times. If the amendments are included, the penalties will go up by 5 to 500 times, as the penalties are being increased to 5 lakh rupees to 5 crore rupees for violations. These fines which will be collected will accrue into the Environment Protection Fund, which has been proposed to be set up under the new amendment. The funds so collected can be channeled towards environment protection and also to provide compensation to the victims who have been affected by industrial pollution. Under the proposed amendment, an adjudicating officer shall be appointed by the concerned authority to decide upon penalties. So if an industry is not submitting reports, or if it is not sharing information, or if it is seen to be deliberately violating the law, then the adjudicating officer shall decide upon the extent of penalties, thus enabling effective enforcement of the provisions. But however, the proposed amendment does not decriminalize serious violations. If there are serious environmental violations that results in injury or death, then it will still be treated as a criminal offence as per the provisions of the Indian Penal Code, along with Section 24 of the Environment Protection Act. So in case of such serious violations that result in injury or death, the jail term will still be applicable. But for regular and simple violations, the offences are being decriminalized as per the proposed amendments, along with hefty penalties to provide for strict enforcement. This provision to decriminalize the offences and to remove jail term will also apply for the provisions of Air Act and Water Act, which are instrumental to tackle air pollution and water pollution in the country. So while the government has justified the rationale behind the proposed amendment, environmental activists and environmental organizations have expressed concern that this might lead to the dilution of the Environment Protection Act. Now let's take up a column from page number 8 that evaluates the progress of China's Belt and Road Initiative in the South Asia region. The Hindu is bringing out this analysis because recently during the G7 summit, the leaders of the grouping, such as US, Germany, and the others, have proposed a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative known as the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Intelligence. So, in this context, it's important to evaluate what is China's Belt and Road Initiative and what is its progress in the South Asia region. See, back in 2013, Chinese leader Xi Jinping proposed an ambitious infrastructure connectivity project which was titled the Belt and Road Initiative, or also known as the One Belt, One Road project. This has been a flagship connectivity project that has been backed by Chinese Premier, and this ambitious project seeks to bring China closer to markets around the world. The Belt and Road Initiative of China is based on two components. One is the Silk Road Economic Belt, and the other is the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road Initiative. Silk Road Economic Belt refers to a land corridor involving a network of highways, railway lines, and oil and gas pipelines that will connect China with Southeast Asia, South Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, and as well as Europe. China's ambition is to revive the ancient Silk Route and connect China with countries in Central Asia, South Asia, West Asia, and Europe, which are blessed with tremendous natural resources. So, as part of this land corridor, known as the Silk Road Economic Belt, China has taken up ambitious road and rail projects and also oil and gas pipeline projects. And some of these projects has already brought China closer to Central Asia, which is blessed with tremendous natural resources. Parallelly, China is pursuing a connectivity project with Myanmar called the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor that will give China direct access to Bay of Bengal. On the other side, China is pursuing a similar corridor with Pakistan known as the CPEC corridor or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, through which it seeks to connect the Balochistan province of Pakistan and the Gwadar port with the Xinjiang province of China so that China can directly access the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. Most of India's neighbors have already joined this initiative, including Pakistan, Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, even Bangladesh, and as well as Maldives. So, amongst India's neighbors, except for Bhutan, all the neighboring countries have joined the Belt and Road Initiative. Then, the second component of the Belt and Road Initiative is a maritime component called the 21st Century MSR Initiative or Maritime Silk Road Initiative. This seeks to connect Chinese ports with important strategic ports of Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, and Europe. Through the maritime component, China is seeking to overcome its weakness at Strait of Malacca and have better access to the Persian Gulf, from where most of China's oil imports come from. As part of the initiative, China has developed several strategic ports across this region and has invested heavily in port construction across Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Eastern Africa, West Asia, etc. So, this ambitious global connectivity project of China is estimated to cost close to $3 trillion, and around 68 countries are likely to participate in it. But however, many countries have been alarmed by the Chinese strategy of debt trap diplomacy because reportedly these Chinese loans have pushed around 23 countries into a massive debt trap. And as they are unable to repay the loans, they are forced to hand over these projects to China for the long term. Most of these projects that China is pursuing, they're not just economic or commercial in nature. Many of them have a strategic purpose as well. It's in this context that countries like India, US, and European countries have expressed concern about the Belt and Road Initiative. And in fact, India has even boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative because the China Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a key component of the BRI, directly violates India's sovereignty over Jammu and Kashmir. The alignment of the CPEC corridor is such that it passes through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is essentially Indian territory that is under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. So, as the project violates India's sovereignty, India boycotted the initiative, and this further increases the alignment between Pakistan and China, especially over the Kashmir issue, thus posing a significant strategic risk for India. Apart from this, China's growing investments and connectivity all across South Asia, Indian Ocean, Africa, West Asia, and Southeast Asia encircles India and directly threatens India's strategic interests in the region. So it's in this context that the column is evaluating the progress of many of these projects in the South Asia region. First, let's take a look at Pakistan and the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. As mentioned, the CPEC is an important component of the Belt and Road Initiative as it allows China direct access to Arabian Sea and helps China to overcome its weakness at the Strait of Malacca. China has already pledged around $62 billion into this project, along with funding and assistance from institutions like Asian Development Bank. The key component of this project is the development of the Gwadar port that faces the Arabian Sea in the Balochistan province of Pakistan. This port allows Pakistan and China strategic access to the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf and is set to increase Gwadar's GDP to $30 billion by 2050. It is also set to create millions of jobs in the coming years. But however, many reports indicate that shipping activities at the Gwadar port is negligible as of now, and in fact the entire project faces significant security threats in the Baloch region where there is an active insurgency going on led by the Baloch nationalists who are seeking to liberate the Baloch region from Pakistan. Upon this, Pakistan's economy is facing a dire crisis, and this combined with the threat of terrorism and radicalism has hampered the progress of China's Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, there have been repeated terror attacks against Chinese projects, which have been claimed by a terrorist group known as TTP or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is the Pakistani branch of the Taliban, and it is a dangerous terror group that has repeatedly targeted Pakistani interests in the region. So while this is the case in Pakistan, something similar can be seen in Sri Lanka as well. In Sri Lanka, China no doubt has made many big investments. First, it developed the strategic Hambantota port in the south of Sri Lanka. But eventually, the Hambantota port project failed, along with the Matala airport located nearby. And eventually, Sri Lanka was pushed into a debt trap, and Sri Lanka was forced to hand over the Hambantota port to China for a 99-year lease. Apart from this, China has developed the strategic Colombo port and also recently won a contract to develop the East Container Terminal at the Colombo port after it managed to snatch away this project from India and Japan. Initially, India and Japan were supposed to execute the East Container Terminal project, but China managed to take this project over with the help of a friendly government in Sri Lanka. But following Sri Lanka's recent economic crisis and the massive assistance that India has offered, Sri Lanka has been forced to return the favor to India by offering the West Container Terminal project to India's Adani Group. And along with this, India has managed to win back several key projects in Sri Lanka. But China continues to make rapid investments in Sri Lanka, and China has also offered massive economic assistance to help Sri Lanka overcome its economic crisis. Apart from financing the construction of strategic ports, China has also invested in several other key infrastructure projects across sectors of telecommunication, power, etc. Then if you look at Afghanistan, Afghanistan has not been entirely brought under the Belt and Road Initiative. China has definitely offered the initiative, but due to the current political situation in Afghanistan, Afghanistan is yet to take part in the Belt and Road Initiative completely. Back in 2016, an agreement was signed between Afghanistan and China, and through this MOU, China has already invested around $100 million in infrastructure creation in Afghanistan. But many of these projects have not yet materialized because of the crisis, and following Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, China has put a temporary hold on many of these projects. Then if you look at Maldives, China made deep inroads in Maldives between 2012 and 2018 when it had a friendly government in place under former President Yamin Gayoom. Yamin Gayoom was seen as a pro-China, anti-India leader who single-handedly managed to destroy India's influence in Maldives, which until then was the most predominant power in Maldives. During these 6 years, China became very influential and took up many key projects, including the construction of the China Maldives Friendship Bridge that connected the capital of Maldives, Malé, with key islands in the nearby region. China also gained lease over a strategic island where it is seen to be developing a port and an airport as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. But following the defeat of Yamin Gayoom in the 2018 elections, a friendly leader has been installed in Maldives, and under the new president, Ibrahim Soleh, India has found a good friend again. And in the last 4 years, India has made tremendous progress and has invested in several key projects. Recently, India has offered around $500 million in financing to fund the Greater Malay Connectivity Project, which seeks to connect four important islands of Maldives. Then coming to Bangladesh, China has made big investments here as well and has promised a total investment of around $40 billion under the Belt and Road Initiative. In Bangladesh, China is seen to be funding railway projects, power projects, river tunnel projects, etc. China is also involved in the upgradation of the strategic Chittagong port and is also seeking to build a railway line to connect Bangladesh with Myanmar and further with China's Yunnan province. It has made similar inroads into Nepal as well, with key road and railway projects that will connect Tibet with key locations in Nepal, such as Kathmandu and Lumbini. So, without a doubt, China's Belt and Road Initiative has made progress, but it has also faced several roadblocks and challenges. And many of these projects, especially in India's neighborhood, does threaten India's strategic interests. Now, let's look at an editorial from page number 6 that provides an assessment of India's foreign trade and balance of payments based on recent export import data that was brought out by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The latest data points towards an emerging crisis with regard to India's balance of payments because India's trade deficit has increased significantly in the last few months. That is essentially, our exports are slowing down, whereas India's imports have jumped by a big margin, thereby increasing the trade deficit. For the month of June, the trade deficit for India jumped to $25.6 billion, which is an all time high. And this happens to be the third time in the last 7 months, and second month consecutively, the trade deficit has jumped to all time highs. The data clearly shows that India's exports have started moderating over the last few months, even though it has increased by around 16% as compared to the previous year. But the huge jump in imports is a big cause of concern because this is the fourth consecutive month that India's imports has crossed $60 billion. Compared to last year, trade deficit has seen a huge jump from $9.6 billion to $25.6 billion. And this persistent increase in trade deficit has started putting pressure on India's current account deficit and balance of payments. On one hand, exports have been slowing down and moderating due to less global demand, and India's key exports, such as drugs and pharma products, engineering goods, and cotton, have taken a hit. But parallelly, India's imports have ballooned, especially the import of coal, petroleum products, and even gold. So, this has significantly increased India's import bill, and the demand for coal, petroleum products, and gold is unlikely to go down in the near term. But exports are likely to remain stagnant for the coming months due to low global demand, and this is likely to put more pressure on India's current account deficit. The concerns have been increasing because in the capital markets, there has been a huge flight of capital from India in the recent months, and FPIs or foreign portfolio investors have withdrawn billions of dollars worth of investment from India, thereby leading to volatility in the capital markets, along with putting pressure on the current account deficit and as well as on the rupee. The Indian rupee has tumbled to around 79 rupees per US dollar, and experts expect this to go down to 88 rupees in the coming months. As of now, India sits on a healthy forex reserve, which is sufficient to take care of any pressure with regard to balance of payments and current account deficit. But if the crisis were to continue, this might start putting pressure on India's forex reserves as well, and might lead to a much bigger crisis with regard to BOP and current account deficit. To address these concerns, the government has recently imposed a windfall tax on petroleum products produced in the country to bring revenue so that it would help the government bridge its fiscal deficit, thereby helping stabilize the macroeconomic factors. This rapid depreciation of the rupee is further putting pressure on the import bill. So the government will have to keep in mind all these concerns and will have to immediately look at ways to boost exports while trying to keep imports within manageable levels. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 that deals with the principles related to handcuffing of an accused or a convict. This issue is in news because recently the Karnataka High Court passed an important verdict on handcuffing. According to the writer, this is a significant verdict because it provides for legal and judicial clarity on when a convict or an accused can be handcuffed by the police. This ruling of the Karnataka High Court came up in the Supreet Ishwar Divate vs. State of Karnataka case and has ordered the state government to pay a compensation of 2 lakh rupees to the accused who was handcuffed by the police without even properly recording the reasons as to why the accused had to be handcuffed, and the reasons have not even been documented in the police case diary as is the established protocol. It has even directed the state government to recover this compensation amount from the concerned police officer who was responsible for dereliction of his duty. The High Court has reiterated the fact that an accused in normal circumstances need not be handcuffed by the police just because they are under arrest. The High Court and even the Supreme Court have made it very clear that handcuffing is only for exceptional circumstances. That is, only when there is a possibility of the accused or the convict escaping from custody, or if there is a possibility of the accused or convict causing harm to themselves. Handcuffing can even be resorted to by the police if the accused or convict pose a threat to others as well. But apart from these established circumstances, which has to be duly noted and recorded in the police case diary, accused or convicts cannot be simply handcuffed by the police, and the court has even mandated that the arresting officer who places the handcuffs must clearly record the reasons in the case diary and provide these reasons to the court when required. In fact, the law with regard to handcuffing was clearly settled in 1980 when the Supreme Court laid down the principles of handcuffing in the landmark Prem Shankar Shukla vs. Delhi administration case. The Supreme Court had made it clear that handcuffing can be used only under specified circumstances which are listed over here, and it is an extreme measure that should be used rarely, only when it is justified. These 3 occasions during which a convict or an accused can be handcuffed include when the accused on his arrest and before he is produced before the magistrate, or when an under trial prisoner is in transit from jail to court, or when the under trial is being taken back from court to jail after the court hearing. And the last case is when a convict is being transported from jail to court and back. Apart from this, if an accused or convict is posing a threat to himself or to others, or if there is a risk of the accused or convict fleeing or escaping custody, only in such extreme measures can the accused or convict be handcuffed by the police. The Supreme Court had also directed that if the arrested individual or the convict can be prevented from escaping custody by increasing security, then this should be the measure the police should be taking instead of handcuffing. So the court has made it clear that the norm to secure an accused or a convict is to increase security and not just to merely handcuff them, which is seen as inhuman and unjustified in unwarranted situations. Only when the situation warrants, as mandated by the court, only in those circumstances, the accused or convict can be handcuffed by the police. So the writer of the column praises the Karnataka High Court for providing more clarity in this regard and supports the right of the accused or convict to be compensated if this right is violated by police officers. Then coming to the last article on page number 7, in this column the writers evaluate the revised National TB Control Program. See, TB or tuberculosis is an infectious disease caused by a bacteria known as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This infectious disease primarily affects the lungs and the respiratory system, but can also affect other parts of the body as well. TB is considered to be one of the worst endemic diseases in the world, and according to WHO, every year around 1.5 million deaths take place because of TB. India is considered to be the TB capital of the world, as it reports around 1,400 deaths almost every single day, as per several estimates. The impact of TB is not just limited to the health impact, but it also has a huge socio-economic impact because of its widespread prevalence and because of its mortality rate. It is said to push families into poverty and thus affect their access to education and healthcare, and as well as their basic access to nutrition and sanitation. Hence, fighting TB is a global and national priority, and India started the National TB Control Program back in 1962. The objective was to detect these cases in the earliest possible time frame and to treat the patients effectively to bring down the mortality rate. After a few decades of implementing the National TB program, it was revised, with new treatment protocols being implemented under the revised National TB Control Program. This introduced more effective treatment strategies such as directly observed treatment or DOT, and this short course effective treatment was started as a pilot project in 1993. Following the success of the program, it was launched nationwide in 1997 and has been further expanded, and by 2006, the revised National TB Control Program achieved nationwide coverage. The focus of this program is to initiate early and firm steps to detect the disease as soon as possible and provide universal access to early quality diagnosis and quality TB care for all the patients. This program is being implemented in a decentralized model, with the district authorities being made responsible for early diagnosis and early treatment through the DOT strategy. Between 2012 and 2017, under the then 5-year plan, the government even adopted a national strategic plan for reducing TB, and this strategy has been revised and updated to form the National Strategic Plan for 2017 to 2025. The goal of this National Strategic Plan is to achieve TB elimination in India. It seeks to build on the success that India has achieved over the last 5 to 6 decades and aims to eliminate TB from India by 2030 as per the goals and targets laid down by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These elimination targets are in line with the National Health Policy of India and as well as with WHO's End TB strategy, and also aligns with the SDG targets of the United Nations. The vision of this National Strategic Plan is to ensure that India becomes TB free with zero deaths, disease, and poverty due to TB, and to achieve the goal of a rapid decline in the burden of these cases, to reduce morbidity and mortality, and work towards eliminating the disease entirely by 2025 if possible. The writers of the column evaluate the program and they point out three specific flaws that exist in the program. The first major flaw, according to them, is that India has not put in place an effective surveillance mechanism to track the occurrence and spread of TB cases. And the writers point out that TB related deaths are largely undercounted, and thus we don't have a complete picture of the extent of damage that TB is causing in the country. Without such extensive and continuous surveillance, it would be very difficult to target the spread of such infectious diseases. The second flaw in the program is that it is extensively focused on pulmonary TB alone, that is, TB related to the lungs and respiratory organs. As discussed, TB can affect other organs as well, and TB infection can get aggravated with other risk factors such as HIV/AIDS, tobacco smoking, etc. These other related factors are not considered by the revised National TB Control Program, and it lays extensive focus only on the infectious spread of pulmonary TB. And the third flaw in the TB control program, according to the writers, is that it does not provide for people's participation, which is seen as an essential tool to combat the spread of infectious diseases. Contrary to this, if you take a look at India's National AIDS Control Program, people's participation was the central pillar of the control program. But the revised National TB Control Program does not pay enough attention to people and community participation, and this, according to the writers, happens to be a major flaw. Hence, they call upon the government to make a course correction by addressing these three major deficiencies so that India can achieve its target, hopefully by 2025 or at least by 2030, in line with the UN SDG targets. Now, let's take a look at a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: the Environment Protection Act 1986 is a landmark legislation for tackling environmental pollution in India. In this context, critically evaluate the proposed amendments to the Act. The second question: examine the progress of China's Belt and Road Initiative in South Asia. How does it impact India's strategic interests in the region? Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link has been given in the description box below. So with this, let's conclude our today's discussion. Thanks for watching.